are listening to the Metal Command Podcast.
Greetings, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of the Metal Command Podcast. Tony here with you. Always excited to see everybody today. And today, I have something very important I need to talk about, and I need to get this off of my chest. I want to talk about college radio for a minute. Or actually, I'm going to talk about college radio for an entire show today, because that is what this episode is going to be about. Now, why am I bringing up college radio? Why is it so important? Why do I feel the need to talk about this? Well, first of all, for those of you that are heavy metal fans, many of you out there ended up finding out about your favorite bands through college radio. Various college radio shows, bands that mainstream commercial stations would never play. And many of your favorite bands attribute college radio to being something that really helped their early success or helped them gain a fan base. Take Metallica, for example. Metallica, in their early days, played a style of music that no commercial radio station would touch. Now, many people see Metallica as this band that's, selling out stadiums and arenas. And, a lot of their music, even the old stuff, does get played on commercial mainstream radio stations. But back in the early 80s, that wasn't the case. And they attribute their early success to college radio. Many of my friends from a lot of European power metal bands, especially the ones that have been around a long time, will attribute the fact that their music was being played by DJs like myself, other people like Dr. Metal, who was on WREW and, of course, WJCU back in the day, people like Bill Peters, and a few of these metal DJs around the country that were playing their music. Now, for those of you that don't know, this show, this podcast, started out as a radio show on 88.3 WBWC and ran for the better part of 25 years, which invariably led to me starting a podcast and taking the show in a different direction, hence why I'm here. But much of what I learned was doing that show for 25 years. And at the end of this video, I'm going to talk about exactly what college radio taught me and how important it was to me and many of the skills I learned from it. I'm also going to talk about something disgraceful that happened here. And that's what I'm going to get into first, though, before I get into what college radio meant to me and how it really shaped me as a person throughout my entire life. So, for those of you that follow the podcast, you saw an interview that I did with a gentleman by the name of Eric Chmielewski. Now, that interview was we were talking about WCSB 89.3. And we talked about a situation that happened, which to me is one of the most disgraceful things I have seen here in the Cleveland area in a long time. And basically what ended up happening was two very self-serving individuals, Kevin Martin from the guy that runs Idea Stream, aka Idea Scam, which is what I call them, and then President Laura Bloomberg, who I think is a very soulless individual who's out for her own personal gain. They basically hijacked WCSB 89.3 from the community and from the students and volunteers that were running it. So before I get into the details of this, let me note that the Cleveland City Council unanimously, now how many city councils agree on anything unanimously? Most of the time they don't. But in this case, they did. They basically drafted a resolution condemning this and telling the school to give the station back to the students. So for those of you that are unaware of what happened, let me tell you the story of what happened and go into some of the details. And also at the end of this video, after I talk about the details, I'm going to talk about why this sets a very bad precedent and how this could really negatively affect the rest of the country here in the States. Essentially, here's what happened. October 3rd at 11:16 a.m., without notice, with nobody knowing about it, IdeaStream pretty much hijacked the WCSB 89.3 radio signal and started broadcasting jazz 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Jazz NEO, as it's called. Then at about 11:35 a.m., and again, nobody knew this was coming, President Laura Bloomberg gets on a Zoom call. Now, she did not have the guts to face the students herself. She did it over a Zoom call. And in that Zoom call, told the students who had no notice and no idea this was going on that the station was no more. As far as they are concerned, they turned all the programming over to IdeaStream. They turned all the equipment over, all the music collection, everything is now being controlled by IdeaStream. And that the station as they knew it is gone. And in another act of cowardice, because this Zoom call, sadly, somebody took it down. Somebody should really put that Zoom call back up. It ended up getting taken down. But one of the biggest things I saw in this Zoom call was that she said she was going to take comments, but was not going to answer questions. Folks, this is a leader of an institution of higher learning acting like this. Let me just make that point really quick. Then, to make matters worse, she has the campus police go up to the building without notice and escort anybody in that building, anybody affiliated with the radio station, out of the building like they were a group of criminals. And this all happened on College Radio Day, the day that the country celebrates the greatness of college radio.
They had the CSU police go in there and escort all of them out. I want to say that again. They had the CSU police escort all of them out. Now, I would respectfully ask you, Mr. Chairman, I would ask for you to call a meeting together with IdeaStream here at City Hall in the council offices. They need to, this is no way to operate. That's like the Gestapo going in there and marching them all out. And that's what they told me. They marched them all out like they were robbers and thieves, and they didn't do anything. That's the way they were treated.
Folks, I felt like I was living in the Twilight Zone when I saw this. But that is what happened. Now, here are some other details that came out. So Laura Bloomberg essentially sold the station out for 1,000 ad mentions. I think it's like 1,000 ad mentions a year. And gets her own seat on the IdeaStream board. And in return, IdeaStream also gets the option to purchase the station. And I believe the agreement's 7 or 8 years. I didn't look into the details of that, but the agreement's 7 or 8 years. But they get the option to purchase the station. And the reasoning behind this was that Laura Bloomberg says this is going to give students all these great new opportunities, and they're going to get all these internships and all this other nonsensical stuff that she has been blabbing about since this happened. Okay. First of all, before I get into each one of these individuals, two very self-serving and selfish people who put their own interests ahead of the community and the students. Let me say this. As I said, the Cleveland City Council universally condemned this. On top of the fact, they had a dog and pony show discussion panel on a show that airs on IdeaStream called The Sound of Ideas to try and mitigate the backlash they are receiving. And the thing is, folks, after that, what you would call discussion, where they evaded pointed questions, lied through their teeth to try and save face, it enraged people even more. So here are my questions. If you really had the interest of the students in mind, so first of all, let me talk about the discussion panel. Let me talk about Kevin Martin first, okay? Because I think this guy is a scumbag. I think this guy is a scam artist, and he is a fraud. And I would tell that man to his face. You hear me, Kevin? I think you're a fraud. Now, the one thing he didn't lie about is the fact that there are goals in a strategic action plan. He mentioned this. They talked about strategic partnerships throughout this entire discussion. But there is an action plan. There is an action plan that, every company and corporation has one. You have certain goals you want to hit by a certain time. One of those one of the bullet points on his action plan was to get a terrestrial radio station to play jazz. Now, they ended up receiving a very big donation, $1 million donation from the Fowler Foundation and these people, they donate to the Jazz Fest as well around here, but they ended up getting $1 million donation. And right after that $1 million donation, suddenly the station gets turned over, which I don't think is a coincidence. I'm going to discuss that here in a minute. But Kevin Martin mentioned something about a study. And folks, let me just tell you, this man is not from the community. This man has no ties to this community aside from the idea stream nonsense and the hijacking he just participated in. He lives in California, folks. And let me just say, this man does not care about the students. This man does not care about this community. Because if he really did, he would not have participated in a closed door negotiation for months. He only cares about checking off part of his strategic action plan, and he cares about furthering himself. He mentioned a study, a market study, right? Which essentially, he says, told him that there was a demand for jazz music 24/7 on a terrestrial radio station. But the interesting part about it is he didn't give any details of this study at all. When was it conducted? What was the sample size? How long did the study last? What were the demographics? What were the age groups surveyed? What were the ethnicities and genders of these people? Was it men? Did you have women? Mostly women? Black, Hispanic, white, other? None of the details of that study have been revealed. This great study that said there's this huge demand for jazz music. Because, folks, I don't see any positive comments about this entire thing happening. Everybody's pissed. Everybody is angry. So where are all these people demanding jazz music here in Cleveland? Because I don't see it, folks. I see a bunch of very angry individuals. If you go to IdeaStream's Facebook page, it's pretty much all people pissed off about WCSB. So I would love to know the details of this study. Because here's the thing, folks. I don't think the study existed. I don't think there ever was a study. I think he's lying. Because here's the thing, if he wasn't lying about it, he would have given details. He would have shown graphs. He would have shown, and I've conducted studies when I was in college, so I know how studies are done and how surveys are done. He would have all that information up there. But he conveniently didn't give the details of the study. He didn't. So where is it, Kevin? Because I don't see any details. He mentioned it again at the there was a Cleveland City Club forum talking about, ironically, public media losing funding. He mentioned this study again. And like a typical politician-like person, because that's pretty much what he is, he kind of really avoided giving details on it. So, folks, I don't think there was a study. And if there was, this was what the study consisted of. It consisted of him, a greedy president of a college looking to further herself, and some people throwing their money around wanting their little jazz radio vanity project on the radio. That's what the study consisted of, because it certainly didn't have anything to do with the community. Because if it really did, you would have hundreds of people in there going off on the WCSB people for posting comments about it on the IdeaStream Facebook page. So I am going to call BS on that. He mentioned internships. And actually, Laura Bloomberg mentioned internships. But the interesting thing is, they don't mention what these internships are. They kind of, like in the discussion panel, they kind of went through and said, yeah, we might have internships with this and other roles, but they didn't really give specifics. You know why they didn't give specifics? And Laura Bloomberg in that panel also said, we're going to find strategies as we go. Because they have no plan. And why are you going to find strategies as you go? Didn't you work that out for the last few months when you were negotiating this? And the thing is, none of these questions were really asked or posed to them. And if somebody did bring something up even remotely like this, they avoided it. Let's talk about Jazz Neo. I'm assuming NEO stands for Northeast Ohio. So you would make the assumption that, oh, okay, cool. This jazz programming going on in this station is being done by native Cleveland people. Well, that's only half true. Half of it is done by people here from the Cleveland area, and the other half is streamed in from outside sources. So is it really Jazz Neo? Is it really all from Northeast Ohio? Absolutely not. That is a fraud. They're branding it as something that it isn't. It's just a bunch of dentist office music that's being played 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And it's being done at the expense of the community and the students. Let's talk about Laura Bloomberg for a minute, who I think is a disgrace, who I think has brought a big black eye to this college and university by doing what she did. Folks, this was not about students. She basically sold that radio station out for a bag of chips and a seat on the IdeaStream board, which is something she can put on her resume to make herself look better. If Laura Bloomberg really cared about the students, number one, she wouldn't have had to, and if everything was so great, number one, she wouldn't have had to do this behind closed doors. People wouldn't be signing non-disclosure agreements if she really cared about the students, if this was so great. They knew what they were doing was wrong, but they did not care. And she is somebody that has essentially obliterated 49 years of culture, of diversity, in history with the stroke of a pen on an agreement that she hammered out behind everybody's back. And after ripping everybody's hearts out, she then has the students escorted out of the building with the campus police. Folks, you know what the campus police should do? They should escort her out of the building because she is a disgrace to that university. And as somebody that is in charge of an institution of higher learning, you are the leader of that institution, and you are supposed to be setting a positive example for every student that goes to that school. And for you to do something like this and have zero remorse for it tells me that you don't deserve your position at that school. It tells me that you are not qualified to lead a group of students, to lead faculty. You are not qualified to represent this community, which you pretty much stabbed in the back. Because that is essentially what she did. She stabbed these people in the back. Not only did she stab these people in the back, people that have put their heart and soul into this radio station, but she did it to the community. And this university is supposed to represent the community in a positive light. And I can tell you flat out right now, she is not doing that at all. and she needs to go. I don't say any of this stuff lightly. I don't ever really get angry on this show. But I can tell you flat out, as somebody that knows how important college radio is, I'm pretty angry over it. Now, they had a discussion panel on the importance of college radio. Allison Baumgardner, another person from WCSB. By the way, I want to just say that Allison Baumgardner, she has really shown true leadership throughout this entire thing. Allison Baumgardner could easily have said, I'm graduating. I don't need this in my life. And she could have easily walked away, but she refuses to. And Allison, if you are watching this, I commend you, and I have the utmost respect for what you are doing. And I'm with you on this. Because what happened to that radio station, and by the way, my son was an apprentice there. What happened to that radio station is absolutely disgraceful. They had another gentleman, Jason Sokol, who actually was at WBWC, very nice guy. He's the general manager at WJCU. And another young lady, it escapes me now, from WRUW. But she was a fan of WBWC in her younger days, and so was her mom. So I apologize. I don't remember all of the names there because I was listening to it. However, that panel was actually very interesting. But there were a few things said at that panel. One thing that was specifically said about the panel that I completely disagree with. You had a couple of gentlemen. I'm not going to really go into who they are, who had very respectable careers in radio, saying that the frequency was lost and they should give up on it. And they proceeded to lecture these folks who were having this discussion panel at the Beachland Ballroom, saying that the frequency is lost. There's no way they're really going to get it back and they should move on from it. I disagree with that. And the question, and what they should be doing, is not lecturing them on what they should do. But what they should be doing is asking the question, what can we do to help? Because the last thing these people need is someone lecturing them, trying to tell them, you're doing this wrong, you're doing that wrong. What they really need is people to help them, people to speak out for them on their behalf, people to not take this lying down, people who aren't effective of it, because WCSB doesn't directly affect me. It affects my son, but it doesn't really directly affect me, but I think it's wrong. And people need to continue to speak out about it, continue to protest what happened. And saying, oh, the frequency's lost, let's move on. I think that's wrong. I think they should continue, and this is my opinion, to fight to get their terrestrial radio station back. Obviously, this has made the news. Obviously, the Cleveland City Council sees it the same way the students and the community see it. But it was really sad to hear people try to lecture these people as opposed to saying, hey, what can we do to help? Now, let me tell everybody out there in the Cleveland area and outside of the Cleveland area why something like this is so important and why this could affect the rest of the country. Because, folks, 98 voices, close to 100 voices who had shows on this radio station, which, by the way, had some of the most diverse programming in the country. You had shows dedicated to specific nationalities, like a Spanish show, a German show, Polish, Czech, African, Arabic, all music from those nationalities on that program. You had every genre of music you can think of, from jazz to punk to heavy metal to grindcore, anything you can think of. And they actually had some very interesting political talk overnight, which was actually, sometimes a lot of fun to listen to if I'm awake that late. Those voices were silenced. And this is not the only radio station this has happened to. There have been a few others. And most of those have happened at least somewhat recently within the last 10 years. Now, why am I bringing this up, and why do I think this is something that could set a really bad precedent? Let me talk about media for a minute. In 1983, early 80s, 83, 84, 90% of the media was owned by 50 different companies. You know how many companies own the media today in 2025? 6. You went from 50 separate companies owning 90% of the media 40 years ago to 6 companies owning 90% of the media today. Pretty scary thing, isn't it? You know what else is pretty scary? If you look at the companies that have ownership stakes in all of these 6 companies that own all of our media, there's a lot of overlap, folks. Take, for instance, BlackRock. I think they own a stake in all 6 companies, or at least most of them. And when you have ownership stake in something, you also have the power to try and influence what those media outlets give to the people. You following me still? A lot of these large equity firms that have an ownership stake in our media also donate to our politicians. And they don't just donate to Democrats. They donate to Republicans. They donate to people on both sides of the aisle. And when you donate to people who get elected, you obviously want something in return. Independent media and independent college radio stations are really the last true independent voices that we have left. Now, why did this happen? Why do you have 6 companies owning all the media? Well, you could thank the Telecommunications Act of 1996, which allowed companies to buy up all of these commercial mainstream radio stations, which at the time, many of which were independently owned. And what they would do is they would fire all the DJs, except for maybe 1 or 2, pay those 2 DJs extra money, and not only would they produce content for that station, but they would produce content for stations outside of whatever area that they reside in. Sound familiar? Many of these deals were backdoor deals. Many people lost their voice in commercial radio. And now the same thing is happening in college radio. And if this isn't mitigated, if this is allowed to happen, you are going to see more and more of this happening around the country. Because IdeaStream, ultimately, the motivation is to have more influence and more power. Yeah, they may be a public broadcasting company, but the more media outlets that you own, the more power and influence you have. The fewer independent voices you have out there. And independent voices have always been the most dangerous thing to the establishment. It's basically what's kept the establishment in check. And they just took close to 100 of them away. Ultimately, and there's a book by Noam Chomsky called Manufacturing Consent, which talks about this. Ultimately, these college radio stations, many of them, have people from every kind of walk of life, in every kind of community, in every ethnicity, and many of these voices are very unique. And we need to continue to have these college radio voices. We really need to continue to have this independent media. And right now, independent media, in my opinion, is is endangered because of crap like this. Folks, if I were you, I would encourage anybody you know to not donate anything to IdeaStream. I would encourage anybody out there, if you were donating to these people, after what they did, I would stop. Because it's absolutely egregious what they did. They extended their power by snagging a radio station behind closed doors. And they did it by stepping on the community and the students to get there. Kevin Martin does not care about the students. He cares about his own agenda. He cares about furthering himself and does not care about who he has to step on to get there. Laura Bloomberg is the same way. She basically gave away the station for practically nothing and ended up getting her seat on the board with IdeaStream. I feel bad for everybody at WCSB or XCSB as they're called. They don't deserve this. The world of college radio doesn't deserve this. The Cleveland area community does not deserve this. That station should be turned over back to the students and the volunteers. They had their voices ripped away, their music collection ripped away, and 49 years of history ripped away. All because of two very selfish individuals and two donors looking to throw their money around. Anybody at XCSB or WCSB, whatever, however you want to go about this, however you want to call whatever you want to call yourselves, you are welcome to come on this show to talk about whatever you want to talk about. I will not censor you. I will give you an open floor to discuss anything you want to in regards to this. I will just leave that out there. Now, folks, I want to talk about the importance of college radio and what it did for me and the opportunities that it opened up for me. Because it opened up a lot of opportunities for me, and I had a lot of great life experiences, and I learned a lot, much of which I carry with me today. I want you to look at these banners behind me. This banner back here, Iron Maiden. Now, a lot of people, even if you're not into heavy metal, you've heard of Iron Maiden. Very big band. Worldwide. They sell out big venues here in the States. Huge stage production. One of the things that makes college radio very unique is that each one of these radio stations here in Cleveland, WBWC, WREW, WCSB or XCSB, and WJCU, they're all different in some way. And the reason I'm bringing up Iron Maiden is that college radio gave me the opportunity to be able to interview every member of that band. WBWC does these things called the Summer Marathon Series. Every Thursday during the summer, they play 18 hours of one artist. And I used to solo those. I would be in the studio 7 a.m. till 1 a.m. And I used to do Iron Maiden marathons. And Iron Maiden's my second favorite band behind Halloween. And I was able to interview every member of Iron Maiden on that marathon. They called in live. And they did it for about 3 or 4 years when I did those marathons. Folks, that was like a dream come true to me as a music fan and as a kid. And doing a college radio show really honed my skills doing interviews. Many people like my show because of the interviews that I do and how I conduct them. I have had, and I'm not trying to toot my own horn, I'm just telling you how what I learned translated into what I do now. People in bands tell the publicists that they love doing interviews with me because of how I conduct them. I learned a lot of that at WBWC 88.3. But I ended up getting to talk to one of the most legendary bands ever because of college radio. Now, the banner on this end, the Empires of Eden banner, this one right here, I sang in that album. And one of the things I ended up getting to do because of college radio is the fact that I was able to network with so many different people in the music industry and around the globe. Now, I sang on this Empires of Eden album here called Architect of Hope with a lot of amazing heavy metal musicians from all different countries. You have people on this album from Japan, from Europe, South America, in Canada, here in the States. And I sang on the subsequent album that came out, Guardians of Time, which came out last year. And I was able to network with every one of these musicians and all of these people in the industry. And it all began in that summer of 1998 on the Metal Command show on 88.3 WBWC. That is where the beginning of what I do now started. That is where I learned how to do what I do now. I was not a communications major. And I certainly was not a broadcast major. However, the communication skills that I learned by doing a college radio show, the ability to really manage my time, and I developed a lot of skills when it comes to interpersonal interaction with people from all different cultures. All of that was the result of college radio. All of those things that I learned, I still use today. And if I had never done college radio, my life would not be what it is now. And I stress that because I want to stress this because I found my voice on this radio station. I found myself, and I made a lot of friends. And that brings me to the banner back here. Halloween. The logo on my hat. A pretty well-known German heavy metal band. I ended up working for them for a number of years as a result of being in college radio. They are great people. The management that they have now, they are great people. They're friends of mine for close to 30 years now. And really the seeds were planted by doing a college radio show. And honestly, they are a band that had always done well around the world, just really not well in the States. They really weren't well known here anymore. I mean, they did have some late 80s success. You know, a couple Headbangers Ball tours for MTV. But their fan base here is a result of college radio. College radio in the 80s, and of course, late 90s, early 2000s to now. They gained a lot of American fans from college radio. Great people. Meeting them changed my life, and the gateway was starting my show at WBWC 88.3. Folks, I think the importance of this, it's hard to put it into words. The 20 apprentices that WCSB had, my son being one of them, they deserve that opportunity. My son really wanted to be a part of something and really wanted to find his voice, and he was denied that. And he was robbed of that by a couple of bureaucrats who are extremely selfish and wanted to further themselves at the expense of the students. So I hope everybody can understand why this is important to me. I want everybody to realize from watching this or listening to this how this can profoundly negatively impact the rest of the country. And lastly, I want everybody to understand that this is something worth fighting for. This is something that should not have been taken away from the many volunteers, from the diverse community of WCSB, and for college radio in general. because what these two people did, Kevin Martin and Laura Bloomberg, was wrong. It is disgraceful. It has put a big stain on their reputation, at least here in Cleveland. And the only way to really rectify this is to acknowledge you made a mistake and give the station back to the students. Until then, people are going to continue to protest. They're going to continue to fight this. And the outrage is not going away. With that being said, again, I will say this to anybody who's either in college radio or who is part of WCSB, also known as XCSB. You're welcome here anytime you want. You want to talk about the subject, you want to go into, what happened, you want to give your side of the story of what happened, I am all ears, and your voice will not be taken away or muted here. That's all I have. Thanks for watching. Again, I thank everybody for supporting the show. And if it weren't for college radio, I would not be here. Thanks.
Mr. President, colleagues, I wanted to share something that happened. I try to be cognizant of the community I'm talking to here, but I want to share something that happened on Friday with everybody so that everybody knows what happened. Last Friday, which was October 3rd, at 11:16 in the morning, Idea Stream Radio hijacked the airwaves of WCSB. They hijacked them at 11:16 a.m., and at 11:35, almost 20 minutes later, President Laura Bloomberg met with students on a Zoom call for 13 minutes. And in 1/2 hour, 50 years of community, culture, and history in Cleveland was obliterated by Idea Stream Radio. They spent months planning behind the scenes to take over the signal without telling anyone. The station engineer had no idea this was happening. They orchestrated all of this. They didn't tell anybody. They locked the students out of the radio station, disconnected their key cards. They didn't have access to their own music collections or their personal effects inside the station. But the really big deal here is that, as the one gentleman said earlier, our community is a fabric of cultures. It is a diverse group of people that we bring together as a city, and I don't think anyone exemplified that diversity better than WCSB or the college radio community in Cleveland. Just for instance, every week they had radio shows dedicated to Hispanic, Hungarian, Slovenian, Polish, African, Asian, Arabic, and German musics. Just that community, put together by people from that community for their community. Not to mention all the other different genres of music. There was a reggae hour, there was a metal hour, there were a few of those. They had up to 98 different shows every single week, programmed by up to 98 volunteer student DJs who didn't get paid. They were volunteers who came in because they loved music. And I want to tell you about one of those shows. It's called Anti-Urban Contemporary Thing. It was hosted by Herb. Herb hosted this show for decades, and he used to have his show from 3 to 5 on Friday afternoons. And when I painted houses, I got the guys on my crew to all tune in to CSB on Friday afternoon and count down to the end of the week. And Herb did a 2-hour show, and his 2-hour show worked like this. He started at the beginning of recorded music, late 1800s, early 1900s, and played nothing but black artists. So he would start with gospel, hymn. He would move into blues. By about halfway through the show, he was into the jazz and rock of the 50s. The second hour would go through soul, funk, R&B. He'd end up with hip hop in the last half hour. And he curated the African American experience every single week for 2 hours because he loves his community and he loves music. And Councilman Conwell knows there is no better way to know a people than through their music. And WCSB educated Clevelanders throughout the region on not just African American music, but Slovenian and Polish and Hungarian, Czech. There was the German radio hour, not my favorite music, but the German people love it, and they had a place to tune into to get their fix. And they did this for people for free, at no charge. And the difference between streaming online and terrestrial radio is cost. Everybody has a radio. Grandma's got a radio. There's a radio in every single house in this town. You can just tune the dial and you might find that sound that changes your life. And it is no understatement to say that college radio pieced together a community that could not exist without it. And WCSB did that for 50 years, and IdeaStream ought to be absolutely ashamed of themselves. And I hope that we can hold them accountable. I've already canceled my membership. I know that other people have as well. We can demand that IdeaStream return programming to the student group. Cleveland State University retains the license for 89.3 FM. They hold the license for WRUW. They could turn programming back over to the students like that. It's simply a choice. There are a couple other things that I want to let you know that we can do. Oh, I'm sorry, I just want to give you a few more facts. If anyone thinks that WCSB was a financial strain on the college, they're wrong. The college spent on average $40,000 a year on this radio station. That's not even a full-time employee. The students raised about $40,000 to $50,000 a year in their radiothon and covered half their costs themselves through volunteer, student-run radiothons. So the station was not the budget for CSU is about $140-some million a year, 146, 147 million. So to spend $40,000 on a radio station is not preventing any other programs from happening. It's not preventing any other athletics or anything else. There's going to be a silent protest tomorrow in the plaza between the Student Center and Rhodes Towers. That's going to be from 11:30 to 12:30. I encourage people to reach out to IdeaStream and let them know that this was a dumb idea, to let them know that we can cancel our memberships until they return this back. And I just want to emphasize one more time, what makes Cleveland a beautiful place is the amount of people that we can support in our community. Not just the mainstream, not just the normal folks, but those weird misfits that need their own island. Those people that don't belong anywhere else. Those people like me that tuned in the middle of the night and discovered grindcore. All right? We need a place to go. We need a home. And college radio gives us our home. It gives us a place to say, I belong. And it gives that place to thousands of people. And I don't think the people that run CSU, Dr. Laura Bloomberg, or the people that run IdeaStream understand how important this has been to the cultural fabric of Cleveland. So I just wanted to share that with you all so that you know what happened, and so that when this comes up while you're out and about, it doesn't surprise you. And to please help us lean in on IdeaStream to hand programming back over to the students. Lastly, IdeaStream thinks that culture is something you program, but the DJs at WCSB know that culture is something you create. Thanks.
Thank you.